Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your Board Game Doctor today. In this video, I want to talk about my first impressions and review of the first expansion to Earth, Abundance. Afterwards, with some thoughts on Earth, the base game, after 40 plus plays of it, mostly on Board Game Arena. I recently had the chance to play Abundance, particularly on Tabletop Simulator, and I wasn't aware that it was on Tabletop Simulator until now. So I would have reviewed this expansion a lot earlier if I had known. I have pre-ordered the physical expansion as well, and so if that is an issue to those who know about Tabletop Simulator, yes, I do have the expansion on the way, and so I don't feel guilty or anything playing it on Tabletop Simulator. So here are my thoughts. First, let's talk about the expansion. It adds... What does the expansion include? It adds a 6-player, it adds more cards to the deck, it adds new mechanisms as well, including, and on these new cards as well, icons for interactions with neighboring players or all players at the table, as well as icons denoting each of the actions for those who are more visually impaired to the colors that are used to represent each action. In addition, another mechanism is the Germinate action, which lets you search the deck for a card that matches an announced attribute, such as a habitat or a cost or a color, you name it. There is a nice aid which tells you and allows you to choose one of those attributes and limits it in a certain way. And then finally, there is a new resource in the form of seeds, which is like a wild resource and can be used to either germinate and search the deck for a certain card, or it can be converted into soil, sprout cubes, etc. A lot of different things. And so that is basically the expansion in a nutshell. And now my thoughts are that I enjoyed the new mechanisms and cards and everything included a lot. I think they altogether streamlined the game very well, making it easier to get desired cards from a large stacked deck, especially considering that they put in more cards into that deck. I know for a fact that the designer did include enough cards to not mess with the percentages, and so a lot of objectives and cards, of themselves include the percentage of that type of card within the deck as a whole to help you predict the chances of drawing into other cards that may synergize with them. And the additional cards have accounted for this percentage, and so they match it, thus allowing for the expansion to be integrated with the base game at an easier rate. Now, I think the new mechanisms of germination, as well as the more positive interactivity with some of the new cards, is really useful and beneficial. I think they speed up the game, but also make it more strategic at the same time. The positive interactions may or may not be as strategic in nature, because you may not have the know-all of playing this game to be really aware of what other players are doing. I feel like you are trying to build the best tableau in and of yourself, and the positive interactive pieces sure may help out someone else and may come into play a little bit more if they affect some of the public objectives, but I felt like it took a little bit of a backseat to what I was trying to strategize in my mind of which cards to play, which cards to compost. And I primarily focused on what the card attributes were and what benefit it gave me as well. But I will say that the Germinate mechanism and the seeds definitely made this game more flexible. And first, talking about the seeds, I think it was really interesting because I used the seeds in more than one way. I did use one to germinate in the game that I had most recently played, as well as to gain some cubes. I was in a position where some of the cubes, or one of the objectives was to have, I think it was 9 cards on your tableau, each with 1 sprout cube on it. And I was coming to the conclusion that I may not have had enough actions to last the round, the rest of the game, to be able to do that. But then I remembered I had a seed left over, and so I used that to place, I think it was 3 seeds or 3 sprouts onto more of my cards, and thus I was able to claim an animal objective as soon as I could. And so that felt really good. And the Germinate action also felt really great as well. I was running out of cards to fit another public objective, and thus I was able to use that Germinate action to secure a card. I mean, you can't really predict what kind of cost or the effects of that card may be, but it really helped to at least have one of those promised and something that you could shoot for until you perhaps had drawn into something else that was more beneficial. And so overall, I think it made the strategy a little bit more flexible, but it also speeds up the game, in my opinion. I think being able to search through the deck and get cards that you need, to get more resources at times that you need as well, make it easier to fulfill the objectives that you're trying to do, as well as build your tableau faster. And so I think because of that, and because of the cumulative mechanisms that are involved in this game, it makes sense to be able to add more cards to the deck, as well as a sixth player to the game. I haven't played it with 6 players yet, but I feel like the time to play a 6-player game won't be significantly as fast or need more time than, say, a 3 or 4-player game. For example, the game that I played with some friends as well was a 3-player game. They were both new to the game, and I taught them the game in about 20 minutes or so, including the expansion. And so the rules burden of the expansion is not very burdensome. It's easy to teach and integrate with the base game. And we played in about an hour and 15 minutes or so from start to beginning. So I thought, timing-wise, it didn't add a lot of time, and it just made the game a little bit more rich and complex. So let's talk about Earth as a whole. Not the planet, of course, but the board game itself. I've played this game a lot, more than 40 times now, primarily on Board Game Arena with other players randomly. And of course, this game compares to modern favorites like Wingspan and Ark Nova, but I think it stands out from those games because of the quickness of play, the simultaneous nature of the play which leads to that quickness, and the flexible nature of how you arrange your tableau as you place cards in front of you. There are several features that make Earth unique in this genre of icon collecting and large deck tableau building types of games. One with the simultaneous actions keeping the game fast-paced and keeping you very much aware of what other players are doing and what kind of actions they are taking. And very similar to games that include an aspect of, say, milestones in terraforming Mars. This game, I feel like after I've played it so many times, it really does, and Earth in particular, feels like a very much racing game. And I think players, this is true to the fact that you are not only racing towards the 4 animal objective cards to try to get as many points from those as possible, of which is one of the 2, and I mentioned this back on the podcast when I had played Earth about 10 times. Strategically, a lot of your points do come from those animal objective cards if you are able to claim them ahead of other people. And so being able to do that, as well as really build your tableau to maximize the amount of public objectives, the dark green objectives that are publicly made for everyone, as well as your own personal ones, as well as the terrain cards that you play out on the game, on your tableau. I feel like the major race to this game, aside from the animal cards, is to play as many cards as you can and race to the end of the game, not only to gain some extra points for building your tableau first, but to end the games on your own terms. I feel like there is a tight balance between collecting resources, taking actions that are a little bit less, more accumulative and less conversion oriented, such as, and specifically the planting action. I feel like, of course, that as many people agree that planting is the most important action. That is how you build your engine and dictate the end of the game. But I think knowing when to start or to stop accumulating resources and to just start planting, and hopefully timing it so other players may be able to take actions that benefit you and your engine, I think is the key to winning this game consistently. If there's anything that I've learned after 40 plus games, and I can attest to this and prove it to you if you look at my ELO on Board Game Arena, is that I'm just an average player. I'm not anything special when it comes to this game. There are folks out there who have mastered this game at a different level than I have. And so I can see that, and after the many games that I've played, mostly for fun, I do admit as well that I haven't tried to play this game super competitively as I have some other games. But I feel like passively, if this were an easier game or just a kind of luck of the draw random type game that was more fun focused, then I would be at a higher level, I think, in my ELO score comparative to other players than I am now. But considering this, it very much feels like how I've approached Agricola so far. Passively learning games, just taking turns here and there asymmetrically or asynchronously, and just kind of learning the game without a lot of active competitive thinking and strategic, deep diving. I haven't progressed as far as I might have thought I would have in Earth, because I think this game does require a lot of thinking. To play the game well from game to game, it takes a lot of effort to plan out your tableau, to make sure you, hold the right cards in your hand and to compost the ones that give you less benefit. And so identifying those correct cards to keep, as well as strategically placing them onto your board, considering the cards that you do draw into, which you will draw into very much so during this game. You end up going through a lot of the deck anyway, and collectively as a group of players. And so there's a lot of forward thinking and making sure that you make the right decisions, considering all of the objectives that are available to you, especially if you play the advanced game, on top of being aware of what other players are doing and racing them towards finishing the game on your terms after you have achieved all that you can. And so there's a lot of course, luck of the draw still involved in this game. You kind of get what you get. But I think there's a lot of ways to mitigate that, a lot of event cards to help you draw into more cards, and then, you prioritize cards that give you soil and cards, and a draw engine as well, so you can get more options to play with during the game. And so this, overall, just to end, I think this game is highly strategic. It has an element of mastery involved, very much like other, large deck competitive games like Terraforming Mars, Ark Nova, even Wingspan. This game fits, in my opinion, in those echelons of a game that is competitive, but also easy to teach to people who are newer to board games, or at least newer to these mechanisms. And it creates a fun time for anyone involved, whether it's competitive or more casual playing. And I think that the Abundance expansion will up the complexity a bit, but not by too much. It will perhaps increase the time length, especially when you play it for the first time, to really understand the mechanisms that are introduced. But overall, I think you internalize those really quick. You can internalize them pretty well within a game or two, and I think the strategic complexity will increase and make this game even more rich to explore for those who are a little bit more headfirst and deep diving into the strategies among this game and its components and strategies. So I love it, and I continue to love it. It's one of my staple games that I always have a game going on Board Game Arena, and I think you should try it out too. So those are my thoughts on Earth, as well as the Abundance expansion. Hopefully it's the first of many to come. Thank you for consulting with me today, and hope that you schedule an appointment with your board gaming doctor real soon. Take care.